Absolutely beautiful looking girl, age 4. She'd been injected by her mother in between her toes with to put her to sleep. And I carried the body, this beautiful young face, beautiful hair. During the autopsy, they sort of peel back the skin to get into the brain, and it was just like a mask. And then you realise what people are like. But
What was the motive for the mother to inject the brown into the kid?
go to sleep.
Just to put the kid to sleep?
So she could go out.
No!
Yeah. Yeah. He had this screamer, he looked up, and one of the directing staff, one of the sergeants in charge of the exercise, were telling us to get back, and it was a machine gun that had drifted too far right, machine gun fire, and it was shooting just below our feet. If it had been another 3-4 foot higher, it would have took us all out.
Oh my God.
They found this guy who was about 50, 60, wearing just a white shirt, no trousers or pants or anything, just facing them. And he'd been next to a heating pipe, so he'd sort of cooked away as well. His arms had been cooked like a chicken. And they said, well, you've got to take the shirt off. So I was trying to get his arm out of his shirt, and it was coming away like a chicken wing in my hand. And I thought, I'm going to pull this guy's arm off now. And that's just disrespectful. Oh, his eyes were wide open. And I thought, oh, maybe we can save him. But when I got to it, it was like a mask. So the back of his head was completely gone. And I can remember the steam coming up from what was left of his brains. But there was enough thing in his eyes there. There was some presence, there was an awareness of what was going on, and he realised his life was fading fast, and he died there. I'd like to see the company taking file. And he said to me, "That's fine, officer, have you got a court order?" And I was, well, no, I haven't. And I said, but I can go and get one if you want me to. And he said, look, we both know you're never going to get it. He says, you're never going to get this file. And his words were, it reaches all the way to royalty, is what he'd said to me.
Wow.
I left with a lot of baggage. I had a very dark 6 months after I retired. Brain was just constantly going, wasn't sleeping. I felt I was either going to choke to death or I had something wrong with my brain. Thoughts, images, guilt. Yes, I've done a lot of good things. I'd also done things where I thought I could have done better with that. A police officer commits suicide every 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right, you're in for a treat today. Robert is an author. Here's his book, highly rated on Amazon, link in the description box. But it's based on stories from his experience as a cop. He did years in the South and then decades in East Midlands Police. So you could say he's done a life sentence. Tons of stories. I've got 2 sheets of them down here. Huge thank you to Robert for coming on. Link in description for his book and the socials. Before we get into the trajectory of his career, we're going to start out with a gripping story. Didn't you got some kind of award for saving a hospital from getting bombed?
Yeah, so in 2000, I was part of the King's Cross crime squad. So King's Cross back then was a very dangerous place, drugs and vice. And they were in the process of clearing it up to make it the sort of gentrified area it is now with the train stations coming in. But back then, we had 24-hour patrols to deal with the robbery and the drugs problems. So the Metropolitan Police set up an Operation Strongbox, which was the idea of bringing people in and doing 24-hour robbery cars. So you'd patrol with your colleague around the area, trying to deal with the robberies, but other things would naturally come along. And one night we were patrolling around the back of Euston Road where the University College Hospital is, and we literally just turned a corner in a plainclothes car, and in front of us we saw a group of around 10 to 15 young Asian males. Even though it was dark in the street lights, you could see the flashing of blades, chains, and metal bars, and a group of them had gone into the hospital front door, and we could see a confusion going on there and some sort of altercation on there. Anyway, we stopped the car, and I have to say, my friend and colleague who was the driver, he got out the car first, and of course you've got to go and back up your mate. So I got out, and just armed with batons, so the extendable baton, the asp, we racked our batons and charged them, basically, shouting police, police, police.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately for us, they did starburst. Knives went everywhere, chains went everywhere, but we could hear shouting going on inside the hospital. The group dispersed. They ran off. A couple made off in a car, but one car was left with the boot open. Me and my friend went into the foyer of the hospital to find one male had been stabbed, quite seriously stabbed, and they were waiting for in the hospital for another rival gang member who had been stabbed and was being treated. So we got first aid, called up for backup, got back out onto the street, and we found the knife that had been used still covered in blood to stab the person in the hospital. But when we went over the car, it was the boot was open, and there was boxes of petrol bombs, so bottles with fuel in it, the bits of cloth they use as the fuse. Controlled the scene, got lots of cops down. But the next day, the incident was mentioned in the Houses of Parliament about, once we'd reported it, it'd been mentioned in the Houses of Parliament about the level of violence, gang violence that was now occurring within London, and it was used as an example. So, yeah, me and my friend, we got a commendation for that, presented by Frank Dobson, as I remember, who was the Health Secretary at the time and an Islington MP. But that was over that 6-month robbery car period, there was lots went on, but that's the one that sort of springs to mind.
Let's go over this a bit more slowly then. So you pull up in the car, you see knives, chains, God knows what weapons, gang of them, two of you. Do you look at each other and be like, yeah, we got to do this? Is there a decision-making process? There
wasn't a decision-making process. The lad I was with, who I'll call Andy, very brave guy. He'd made the decision, more or less, to be honest. Door went open, and I knew we had to do it. So it all just kicked in after that. It was, and we literally just charging at this mass, swinging our bat and shouting police, police, police.
So how high was your adrenaline going when that door opened?
Pretty high, but you also, I suppose, there's the motivation that someone's going to get hurt here. They're going into a hospital. There's going to be members of the public there, children, who knows what's in there. So that outweighs the risk. In some ways, that motivates you to go and take them on.
Is it in the back of your mind that there could be a gun?
No, there wasn't, to be honest. There wasn't, to be honest. I mean, it wasn't in the back of your mind. It could have been, but the level of these were rival drugs gangs, as I understand it. Asian drugs gangs, their access to firearms, what I imagine would be pretty low. Risk of firearms were pretty low about that time. But there was, as I've said, no doubt we'll come on to about my work around knife crime. A knife is the most efficient killing tool you've got, and it has been for thousands of years. So yeah, I mean that is the danger. I suspect they thought there was more of us than there was, and then perhaps if they'd stopped and they didn't panic and saw there was only two of them, it could have been very different. But you get that momentum, that aggression, the speed, the shock of it all, and I think that all worked in our favour to help disperse them.
So as you are charging at them and they notice you, and there's a second where the atmosphere changes and they start to disperse.
Yeah.
Does relief sweep over you?
Not at that point, because it was pretty obvious someone had been hurt in the foyer of the hospital. So you're then dealing, what's the next thing? So we managed to disperse them. Is there still some in the foyer? Are we going to have to? We went in the foyer. We're going to have to start wrestling with people and detaining people in there. Fortunately, we didn't. They'd all come out, but there was somebody that was stabbed. They're in a hospital, fortunately, so staff were helping there. And we came out, and Andy managed to find the knife on the floor. Lots of screaming and shouting between us. And then we were worried about this car. Why was the boot open? And it turned out because they had these petrol bombs in there. So we suspect that would have been the phase 2 of that attack, really. They were going to start petrol bombing places.
Good grief. All right, let's go back then to what led to you joining the police. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in northeast of England, Durham, seaside town. I came from a solid working class background. Mum was a lollipop lady, my dad was a postman. We lived in a 2-up terraced house, surrounded by estates. And I often say there was love in the house, but there wasn't a lot of nurture. It was generally accepted that if you were born in that town, you more or less stay in that town. You get a bit of a dead end job. Went to school, and the schools weren't great. I basically stopped going at 15, became a truck driver's mate.
What didn't you like about school?
No one really explained what it was for. It was just somewhere to go for the day. Yeah. And my parents, the teachers, no one sat down and said, Robert, you got to get an education and get a good job. So it just all seemed a bit of a waste of time. And I was fortunate, my father was a big reader, big into military history, big into current affairs. So I learnt a bit through him and got an interest through him. But I stopped going when I turned 15 and would travel up and down the country in a truck, shifting fridges, and which was a real good life experience. And it got me to learn how to communicate people at every level. And I suppose the other cliche is, people come up and says, well, I could have gone off the tracks. I could have been, I don't think there was any danger of that with me. I had a strong moral compass from my family. But no doubt people around me did go to prison, and some of them didn't live that long. But for me, once I turned 15 and a half, I knew I had to get out. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but it was the army really that I decided, well, I'll go and try the army.
And it was your dad who got you interested in the army?
Yeah, so I'm a 4th generation soldier. Father was in the army. Grandfather was in the Durham Light Infantry, won the military medal at the Arras, so was like a bit of a local hero. My great grandfather was in the First World War, so yeah, it was always heading that sort of way. So I joined at 16.
What was your entry position?
Well, junior leader. So I went in as a junior leader, which is a bit like sixth form for soldiers, weirdly. But that was on the south coast, and it was good. It was tough. It was like a year training, basic training. But we did a 6-week induction course, and then we were sent on an exercise called Drake's Drum, which this was me 1998, and it was a huge national exercise where they were practicing what would happen if Russia invaded. So they were using all available forces, so TA, junior leaders, everything to protect valuable sites or high interest sites. So even though we'd only been in the army 6 weeks, we were only 16, we were suddenly being helicoptered around between nuclear sites and communication stations and things like this to protect them. So it was great. We did that for about a month. But when we came back, because we'd done that, everything else just seemed a bit less, because we'd experienced what it's like to be, proper soldiers, for want of a better word. But no, it was a good foundation for me, the junior leaders, and I think it did help as I grew up when I went into more leadership roles.
So did that regimented lifestyle suit you? Did you adapt easy?
Yeah, I think so. I like discipline. I like being methodical. I did adapt to that. I like the physical aspect, the firearms aspects. In the junior leaders, we'd learn a bit more about history of Ireland. We'd learn to speak German, because a lot of us were expected to go to Germany at some point. So yeah, I enjoy it. I had some good friends, which makes all the difference. And then I managed to pass out sort of first time.
And you went all over the world.
Yeah, well, I went to when we was coming out of junior leaders, I was part of the Guards division, and this was 1989, and they didn't know the Queen Mother was either going to turn 90 or she was going to shuffle off the mortal coil, and the army weren't sure which way it was going to go. But either way, it meant they needed more ceremonial troopers in London. So I and others were expecting to go to Germany on tanks, etc. We were suddenly put into the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment to learn to horse ride, become ceremonial troopers, and yeah, that was very, very different to what we expected.
How did you like horse riding?
I enjoyed the horse riding, and I hadn't seen, the only horses I'd seen were the gypsy ones that were tied up on the estates. That was the closest I got to a horse. But you do a 6-month riding school, and it's very physical, very, very tough. But I did enjoy the horse riding. But what comes with it is the kit, cleaning the kit, and the whole atmosphere in the place. So this was 1989, very, very different now, I want to stress that, but the Household Cavalry Mountain Regiment in Knightsbridge at that time, it had the highest suicide rate in the British Army. It was built on, what would be the word, intimidation, violence, very tough physical environment, not a nice place to be. So we were all sort of put in there, and once we got through the riding school, actually I had an accident in riding school, so I was put back a bit. And
what was the accident?
So I came off a horse. So we were in the summer camp. So I used to move the horses out to Thetford at the summer, and the horses loved it and they go a bit crazy. But we were in a riding school, and I was trying to get a horse into canter called Duke, and it was notorious, this horse. It's been a bit of a pain. And the horse riding instructor was in the middle of the menage, and he basically threw his hat at the back of the horse, and the horse didn't like this and threw me off and stamped on my neck, my back, and then kicked me in the head. And I was knocked out. I came round, and I was in a medical room with a pen in my hand that was being moved up and down a piece of paper. And I couldn't see properly. I couldn't think. I was massively concussed. And I was just signing this bit of paper, which is basically a disclaimer. And then they bandaged me up. And the thing I remember is I thought, well, I best go and tell my mum and dad I've had this accident. So I managed to get myself out of the medical centre, was walking up along the camp to the phone box, and I looked like Mr. Bump with like bandages around my head and my hair stuck up. And I could see an entire squadron, like 60 men, walking down to somewhere, marching past me. And as each one saw me, they all started to fall into bits of laughter as they saw me, this dazed-looking young soldier with his hair and his bandages and everything, just walking up, waving up and down to the phone. So, yeah, so I had that accident, and then that put me back a bit. But then I went through the riding school. But it's really when you get into the troops that what they call the troops and the stables that, and you start living on the landings. That's when things change, because you're protected to some degree before that point. But it was really, really tough doing Queen's Lifeguard. A day it used to take 16 hours to do the kit. You're lucky if you got some sleep, then you'd look after the horse. We used to actually clean our kit in 20 minutes through the night, in 20 minutes bursts, 20 minutes cleaning kit, 20 minutes get sleep. You'd walk into the showers and 5 people asleep in the showers because they were just that tired. Then you'd get up at 5, get the horse ready, go on QLG. And then once you got on there, the senior troopers basically ran everything. NCOs had their own little scams. The officers you didn't really see. So there was no there was a lack. Looking back now, there was a lack of leadership, lack of transparency. What went on? They were just interested in getting people out. And then I did manage to make my way through it. She lived, the Queen Mother, as it happened. So she had a 90th birthday party. And birthday parades, did the escort for President of Italy, President of India, Lady Diana, Princess Diana she was, escorting her. And it looks great, and there's those things you will always remember, being on a horse in the sun, glinting off the cuirasses and the sword. It's a view not many people get, and it's fantastic. And when you talk to people, it's the thing that people are interested in. But there was a lot darker side, and as I found out researching the book and from my own experiences, it was even darker years before.
Wow. So then you get to operational regiment and then overseas.
Yeah. So we got sent from Knightsbridge up to the operational regiment. The operational regiment's very, very different. Good leadership. We had people that had been in the Falklands just a few years before. Lots of structure. Officers were more engaged. We had our barracks were better. Still a tough place to be. You had to, you couldn't be shy in retiring. You had to show that you were sort of quite physical if it needed to be, but a very different environment and more camaraderie. Go out, drinking with your friends, and you weren't constantly worried about kit and what kit you had to do. Just keep the wagons up to date, your personal kit up to date. Exercises, lots of exercises in Salisbury Plain and places like that. But we used to go down to where all the vehicles were, and I used to find that a bit dull, to be honest. So people would be taking screws off a bit of equipment, throwing them away, and then going over to QM Tech to get another bit of a screw to come back again, just to have something to do. And you'd have all the stuff of being sent over to quartermasters to get sky hooks and tartan paint and all these sort of things. And one day I just thought, I'm a bit bored of this. So I went back and laid on my bed, and the orderly corporal burst in. So the corporal was responsible for discipline. I thought, I'm in trouble now. And he looked at me and said, what are you doing? I said, I didn't feel too well, Corp. I'm just having a lie down. He says, do you want to go to the Falklands? So I went, yeah, I'll go to the Falklands. So, right, go and see Sergeant such and such. Went over, and then I went into a training regime, and there was a section of us, maybe 11 or 12. And we were sent to the Falklands. So that was over Christmas of 91 to 92. And that was really good. The Falklands is a wild place. It's got the largest live firing range outside Canada, so you're using live ammunition all the time. Obviously got the wildlife. We'd have these 6 or 7 day exercises. I remember once we were going into a section attack, and we were walking up this hill, and I had my backpack on my rifle, and my head was bent, and we were on a ridge, and I could see bits of earth being thrown out just below my feet, about a couple of feet below my feet. And I thought it must be animals burrowing into the ground. And then we heard this scream. We looked up, and one of the directing staff, one of the sergeants in charge of the exercise, were telling us to get back. And it was a machine gun that had drifted too far right, machine gun fire, and it was shooting just below our feet. If it had been another 3-4 foot higher, it would have took us all out.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so you had that. Wow. You have that with live firing.
Wow.
But the Falklands was good, and we got abandoned. So we went out for a 7-day patrol. We went to somewhere for the pickup, and after 7 days, the helicopter didn't turn up. So we were left for 3 days, living off boiled sweets.
What?
And it all went a bit Lord of the Flies. Oh. So there was 7 of us all going a bit crazy. Our helicopter didn't turn up. The corporal in charge of us locked himself away, probably with all the food that was left in a basher, didn't come out again. And we went everyone was going a bit crazy with walking around with bits of animals on their heads and stuff like this. And we saw a light which is across a sound. So a sound is a big inlet. And we thought, well, we'll have to get to that light because we haven't got any food or anything. And it turned out you had to walk miles and miles in, and we couldn't get across to it, so we turned back again. And we were running out of food. We managed to get some fish from somewhere and put that onto a fire. And then out of nowhere, just as though you're getting people that are really hungry, starting to fall out with automatic rifles and ammunition with them all the time. Out of nowhere, you hear this, and it's a helicopter, a Bisto's helicopter, would come in 3 days after and rescued us. But
wow.
yeah, it was it was a funny situation.
So was that the most extreme environment you were in then, Falklands?
Yeah, the Falklands, it was good testing ground later on for Ireland, the distances you cover, the range of heat. I've got a picture where we're sunbathing in the morning, where we've all sort of laid down on our backpacks, and I've actually got sunburn for my dog tags. There's a big circle where my dog tags have been, and then there's a picture in the afternoon where it's snowing, and we're laying up against the snow with all our Arctic weather gear on. I mean, the extremes of because our winter is their sort of summer, but the extremes of the weather. But it was really rewarding. Taught me a lot of infantry skills, which I would then use in Ireland. So yeah, it was good.
What challenges were in Northern Ireland?
So Northern Ireland, when we went there, it was we were attached to the Irish Guards. So it was 92 to 93. First time the Irish Guards had been sent there. We were based in Fermanagh. And it was a challenging tour. At the end of it, the commanding officer said there'd been more contacts in that 6-month period than they had 3 or 4 tours beforehand. And I think it was a bit of a publicity stunt to use the Irish Guards in Ireland. It didn't really work out. I was part of a search team, so we did lots of searching of houses. We'd go to other parts of Ireland as well, searching of farm buildings, and you get sent on a course about counter-terrorist search, and you go to a place in Kent, and you do these, learn how the IRA make bombs and how they set up traps. And I remember going into this house, which was all set up with different sort of booby traps. And there's a way that the booby traps that they had back then, which was they had 2 bits of wire, one horizontal, one vertical, on the back of doors. And as you move, there was a weight on the back of the vertical one. And as you move the door, it would cause the 2 wires to touch, and that would complete the circuit, and you'd cause an explosion. So you'd walk into these houses and you'd have to search to make sure there's no tripwires or anything. But I remember being in this sort of living room, and a guy who was stood near me, he'd opened up this cupboard and it had one of them traps on it. And this was in training though, so it completed the circuit. But what they used to do to illustrate the point is it used to blow out flour. So he opened the door, connected the circuit, and he got a load of flour in his face. There was a lad behind him who was laughing so much he sat down on the sofa, and the sofa exploded. Did exactly the same thing, covered him with flour as well. But it was a really good course, and you learn an awful lot.
So when you were applying that in Ireland then,
yeah,
did you come across the traps and you spotted them? And
we didn't. We were quite fortunate, but you don't know, of course. So you do a drag and drop, and I do my character Ryan Connor in the book. I made him a search advisor as well, so a counter-terrorist searcher, and I talk about it there about how you'd use drag and drop techniques, like a big bass broom, drop down and then pull back through. So we didn't find him. We did find some arms and stuff like this, and arms dumps and caches whilst we were doing searches of places. So we were very lucky. But you never know. When you're starting a new premises, it could be booby trapped. You can't take the risk, so everything's got to be done each time.
When you're extracting those weapons, are you worried that you might come under fire or anything?
Yeah, so I remember one particular time we were very, very close to the border, and this was just before we were due to leave, and the Garda Síochána was supposedly securing one side of the border, and we were on the other, and we just didn't feel that we had that safety around us. It was so close, and we heard a few bangs. The IUC would say, "Oh, that's just the IRA test firing." We don't know, but there was certainly a few bangs going off whilst we were searching that premises, and yeah, that was the only time I think where the general consensus in the team was this isn't great, because Garda Síochána are very, very professional, but back then they still had well, it was known that they had contacts and some sympathies. Certain people had sympathies with the IRA, so we've been a pretty open target from one side.
So why did you end up leaving the forces and going into the police?
Yeah, so once we were in Ireland, we worked a lot with the Royal Ulster Constabulary. They were, heroes all, really, in my opinion. Very professional. The risks that they took were unbelievable. But as well as the terrorism side, stuff, you didn't often see a terrorist. But we used to work with the IUC, and I used to watch them as they were working on the drugs getting smuggled in from Southern Ireland, the burglaries that was happening, the firearms being moved. This was all seemed more tangible to me and equally important. And also, when I was out patrolling, I suppose I was quite unusual in as much as I would try and talk to the people. And I remember going through a farm once, and a lady came out very, very excited, shouting, effing and blinding at us because we were going through their farm. And her husband was known to be what was called a player, links to the IRA. And people, the other perhaps soldiers, for their own reasons, rather dismissive or not very nice. But I thought, well, why not try and speak to her? So I went to speak to her. I got a lot of abuse for a good 30 seconds about, how terrible I was. But I just stood there, let it get out of the system. And then I started to say, well, tell me what the issues are. What's happening? What's happening when you go through? What's happening to your livestock? Where is the problem? What more can we do? And she started talking to me. And afterwards, my corporal said, well, no one's ever done that before. And actually, we could maybe use her to go through, and maybe she'll give us some information eventually. So it took a period of time, but whenever we went through that farm, I'd make an effort to speak to her, just on the off chance that you might say, her husband is at so-and-so farm, or he was late last night again, or whatever, just to get that bit of intelligence. And I started feeding that into the intelligence system. And I felt I was that more inclined, that appealed to me, rather than the aggressive side, perhaps, of soldiering. So when I came back from Ireland and had worked at the IUC and got this idea of how policing works, about gathering information from people, I thought, well, I'm going to try the police. So I applied for the City of London Police, which recruited nationally at the time, and the story goes that about 3,000 people apply every year for the City of London Police, and they take around 10. So it is quite a big attrition rate. But I was fortunate. I was one of them 10 that got in 1994, but they did like their ex-guardsmen, their ex-soldiers, because it was the Ring of Steel time about then. So so I joined the City of London Police.
And what was your first challenges or cases with them?
So the City of London, it had the Ring of Steel because it had suffered the Moorgate bomb a couple of years before. Big target for the IRA, but it tended to be if something went off in the city, it tended to be headline news. So there was a fire at Nat West that happened one time. We would stand at the entry points and monitor the traffic coming through. Sometimes you would search them. Sometimes you'd ask if they had any toffees. It depends what sort of mood you're in, really. But one time, I was stood at Moorgate entry point, which is known as entry point 4, and a car came through the entry point, which it shouldn't have done because it's a dead end, did a bit of an awkward 3-point turn, and then stopped. And I thought, oh, that's unusual. So I walked up to it, and the door opened, the driver's side door opened, then shut again. And I thought, oh, that's strange in itself as well. So I went to the driver's side door, and I don't know what forced me to do. I wouldn't normally do this, but fortunately I did. I opened the door, and as I opened the door, in the well of the door, I could see there was a upside down handgun. So the pistol handle was facing me, and I looked at the sort of top of this pistol. Look at this chap. He looked at me, and then we had a bit of a struggle to get to the gun. So we were struggling with this handgun, and I managed to get to my radio to shout the emergency button, and I put male with a firearm in 2.4, and I did manage to get to struggle it off him and get him down and pin him down. City London police have firearms cops everywhere, and I looked. And I was laying on top of him with this gun out.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I've got some exciting news to announce. Michael Franzese is coming back to tour the UK in 2024. The Remade Man Tour, the Michael Franzese story. Michael Franzese, once named one of the 50 most significant mob bosses in the USA by Fortune magazine, and a former member of the notorious Colombo crime family, will take you deep into the world of organised crime, sharing captivating tales and insights into the mafia's past, present and future. Join us for an unforgettable evening with Michael Franzese, the original Goodfella, as he exclusively sits down with myself, Sean Atwood. With me as the host, there's going to be a no-holes-barred exploration of Michael Franzese's life, including his numerous arrests and jury trials that ultimately led to his pleading guilty to a federal racketeering charge, a 10-year prison sentence, and $15 million in restitution. You will have the unique opportunity to ask questions during an audience Q&A session, making this event a must-see for true crime enthusiasts and anyone curious about the underworld. Don't miss this explosive in-conversation with Michael Franzese. Live on stage in the UK. This exclusive in-person event will be held in various locations in the UK, Ireland and Scotland. Link in the description box below this video if you want to grab yourself a ticket. Back to the podcast. Cheers.
The way, holding him down, and I saw the firearms officers were coming up in their bulletproof vests, and they had these sort of jumpsuits, and they were what I'd know as pepper potting. So one was going up and then kneeling down, and the other one was coming up and kneeling down. And then they got to me and got him nicked and took him off. But it turned out he was a foreign guy, and he'd just done an armed robbery in Tottenham, took £70,000 using this handgun, which it turned out was an imitation. It was a blank firer, but. Yeah, that was a really good arrest. I got fortunately I got accommodation for that one as well, which was good. But again, not much time to think about it. By the time afterwards, you're like, well, that could have gone very, very differently. But at the time, it's a bit of a survival instinct. Just got to wrestle it off him really, and then work it out stage by stage.
What was your first experience of corpses and deaths?
So again, in the city of London, I think the first one I went to was we had Bart's Hospital there, and a chap had gone missing from inside the hospital, but he'd been found in the underground pipe ducts, and it was strange because he'd stopped just below an access, like a maintenance access door. So the people had found him when they'd opened this access door, which was in the floor, then lifted it up. They found this guy who was about 50, 60, wearing just a white shirt, no trousers or pants or anything, just facing them. And he'd been next to a heating pipe, so he'd sort of cooked away as well. And I was relatively new in service, and someone said, oh, that'd be a good one for Robert to go and do. So I went across to him, and what I was really impressed with is the pathologist came out to that, and she was quite a small lady, mid-60s, and she got into her white kit and crawled down into it and checked the body and everything, and she wasn't scared of it, and I was like really impressed. I thought, well, if she can do anything, I can do it. So we go out, and he turned out we'd gone missing from the hospital. He had some sort of disease, which meant he was always felt as though he needed to go to the toilet. So I either thought they took his trousers off, and he just crawled somewhere warm. But we eventually got the body out, and then you go with the body to the coroner's, And I got a message through my radio. It's been investigated by so-and-so DI. Can you take all what's left of his clothing off? So there was this guy laid out on a table, and he'd blistered and everything down one side because of this heat, and his arms had been cooked like a chicken. And they said, well, you've got to take the shirt off. So the coroner's mortuary assistants, who are normally really, really robust, and you have to be a special sort of person to do that, they said, well, we're not going to do that. You're going to have to do it. So I was trying to get this chap's shirt off, his arm out of his shirt, and it was coming away like a chicken wing in my hand. And I thought, I'm going to pull this guy's arm off now. And that's just disrespectful more than anything to that person. He was a person with loved ones, etc. So I thought, well, I can't do it. And I just called back up and said, look, if I do that, it'll completely ruin the body. We're going to have to cut it off at some point in the future. But that was a really sad case because he had no family. He had a flat somewhere South London, come to Barts for specialist treatment. No next of kin or anything, just gone. But
does that affect you, Robert? Did you have nightmares after doing that night?
No, not then. And I've thought about this since, that if you see someone living and breathing and then you see them dead, that has a greater effect. But very often in the police, the first time you've seen that person is when they're deceased, so you've never known them alive. So in some ways that's easier to deal with. Not always the case, of course, but very often when you see the people, their bodies, they're one part of a jigsaw. It's either a murder inquiry, or it's an unexplained death, or it's a traffic accident. So yes, it's terrible what's happened to that person, but they are one bit of a whole. So you're also thinking about CCTV witnesses. They teach you as a detective the first day of court if it's a murder, etc. You're looking at those processes really. Children is always more difficult. I remember a case when I was in the Met, which had an effect on me later down the line, which was, I always remember her name. It was a young girl called Jasmine, dual heritage girl, absolutely beautiful looking girl, age 4. She had long, black Afro-Caribbean hair, lovely skin. She'd been injected by her mother in between her toes with to put her to sleep, and she died. And it had been investigated, and I was on the night duty crime car, and I went to it, and I carried the body out, and then the mother went to the Old Bailey, was found guilty of manslaughter. And I went to the autopsy, so I was assigned to the body. And I remember this beautiful young face, beautiful hair, and during the autopsy, they sort of peel back the skin to get into the brain, and it was just like a mask. And then you realise what people are like. But because of the way she died, when I was a detective sergeant many years in the future, dealing with sudden unexplained death of children and as a DI, etc., then I would always check between their toes just to make sure that there was no needle marks and similar thing hadn't happened. So children is very difficult.
Robert, what was the motive for the mother to inject the brown into the kid?
Go to sleep.
Just to put the kid to sleep?
So she could go out.
No!
Yeah.
How often do you come across things like that?
That was the only time I think I've ever came across it was then.
Oh my goodness. And what kind of sentence did that person get? Do you know?
I can't remember, to be honest. It was taken over by. I actually met the guy who was the SIO. He did so there was a course called the Sudden Unexplained Death in Children course, which you do as a detective inspector. I did that course in the last year of me in the police, and the guy that ran it, he turned out he was the SIO for that case. And after the course, I spoke to him because he'd mentioned it during that. I said, I was the night duty crime car DC for that job. But he was still referring to it years later.
That shook me up just hearing it.
Yeah. Well, I did that course and I was told, this is in my last year of being in the police, I was told, well, they said, well, we'll send you on a SUDIC course, is what it's called. And there's a DI for when you're doing night duty, DI cover. So you cover the night duties and days. And they said, and someone said to me, you'll never get one. Don't worry. They're very, very rare. And normally the child protection DI will take over anyway. And I had 3 in 3 months, three dead children, 3 months. So that was pretty unusual.
So this was one of them.
No, this was years before. This was when I was a DC in.
What were the 3 then?
So we had so when I was my last year being in the police, so 20 odd years after Jasmine, there was 2 young babies. One had been born quite ill. It was during COVID. One had been born quite ill and had died in a child seat that had been next to electric fire. So they didn't know if that had cooked the child or anything. But what I remember about that is the mum, as you'd imagine, was distraught. But the father just had a horrible smirk on his face and wanted the attention. Yeah, and how somebody didn't give him a few words of advice, I don't know. But it turned out they did have lots of medical issues, this child, so it wasn't to do with the fire, but you've got to go through the investigation. So you get that first call in, and then it is taken over by a DI from Child Protection. The next one, similar circumstances, I think. Oh, that was an immigrant family. They were a very nice Asian family that had recently arrived in the country. Young boy, 6 or 7, had eaten something the day before, didn't agree with him, then had woke up deceased the next day. Police were called. No concerns with the family then. Family were absolutely distraught. Medical issues that had just caused it. And then the last one was a girl that drowned in one of the swimming pools through COVID, where people were sticking stuff in their garden. I think she was about 10 or 11, and she drowned in one of these swimming pools that were in the front. But the issue with that is her brother had recently come back into the address, and he was on the sex offenders register. So you're thinking, well, has something gone on there? And he's trying to cover his tracks. Turned out it wasn't. It was tragic accident. Had a fit when they were in the pool and drowned.
With the boy who ate something, do you recall what he ate?
No, it was something that the mum had made up. It might have been like a stew or something, bean and rice stew. Whether that was connected, I don't know. Because again, with the police, particularly when you're on call, you go to it and you manage what's in front of you. And then you could work 12, 13 hours on it, but then you'll hand it over to somebody else, and then you go back to your own work. So I was the missing persons DI at that point. So it's handed on to somebody else, and then they take that investigation forward. So you don't always hear what happened. You go to the autopsy the next day generally. But yeah, and you're sort of, as the DI position, you're the sort of coordinator, making sure everybody's doing anything else and liaising between the bosses. And the DCs do a fantastic job in the child protection, generally, but not always. Female officers, super professional, and they, certainly from my point of view, because I was fairly new to it, I lent on them heavily, but they knew what they were doing. All the forms coming through, everything that needed to be done, and I was just making sure they could get on with their jobs, passing up the chain, passing up a bit of an investigative eye. So with that one, why is the first one, why is the father, who's a young lad, 17, 18, why is he so smug? With the girl in the swimming pool, why? We've just suddenly got this sex offender back into the house. What's that telling us? So I'd have that investigated overview. And once I was happy that we could rule them out, or rule foul play out, it then goes into a process, really.
So, Robert, earlier you said even more disturbing was when you see the lights go out of someone's eye. Did that happen in your career?
Yeah, yes, it happened. So when I was in the City of London Police, we went to a traffic accident, and it was on Thames Embankment, and a car had been driving really fast, and it had gone into the side railings and pushed a young lad out of the quarter light. He'd been thrown through the quarter light and dragged along, and the railings had took the back of his head off. So when I got there, the car was in a bit of a mess. Someone was laying on the floor, and this young lad was there, young Afro-Caribbean lad, and his face was looking at me, or his eyes were wide open. And I thought, oh, maybe we can save him. But when I got to it, it was like a mask. So the back of his head was completely gone. And I can remember the steam coming up from what was left of his brains. But there was enough thing in his eyes there to acknowledge that there was some presence, there was an awareness of what was going on, and he realised his life was fading fast, and he died there.
When you're looking into the eyes of a person like that, what goes through your head?
Nothing. Well, it's terrible, but again, because at that time you've still got traffic moving. What's gone on? Is the car stolen? Has he been hit by the car? Is he just a member of the public that's been caught by the car? You're starting to get in cordons up. You're talking on the radio. You don't really think about it at the time, but then you realise that some will always stay with you. So that one, will always stay with me, I think. And then there was another guy, again, when I was working in East Midlands, 2 brothers were stabbed in the neck when I was a uniformed inspector.
What was that about?
That was some sort of drug dispute. It was a bit after, but after I'd done the knife crime coordinator role, and I was a uniform inspector, but there was a call to a stabbing in a city centre. And it was about summer, maybe 5 o'clock, so it was unusual. It was outside of the nightclub, but not connected to the nightclub. Nightclub wasn't open. But when we got down there, 2 lads had been stabbed in the neck. So there was already people when I got there, 1 car there. I was perhaps the 2nd car there. Blood pouring from the neck, so put my hands over him, over the neck, trying to get first aid down to it from the back of the cars. Ambulances turned up, just putting pressure on the neck. And it turned out it was 2 brothers that had been stabbed to do with a drugs debt. And unfortunately, the guy I was with died, the other one survived. But again, you can see that it's the acknowledgement in people's eyes that they realise this is bad, I'm going to die. At a very, very basic instinctive level, they understand. It's not the pain. I don't think it's that people feel pain at that point. It's just the confusion. It's a inevitability of the fact that they're going to die soon.
Did he say anything to you?
No. It was just pure terror, I suppose.
Oh. Right. So we were left off, and you were back at the City of London Police. How long were you with them?
About 4 years.
What other notable incidents were there during your career there?
I think the other, which shows what the city was like, obviously you've got all the businesses there. On a Thursday, Friday night, it was like any other big town, big city. All the pubs would be full, and you get your pub fights. But then every so often you get these jobs. So I remember being called to a job by a dog handler who'd stopped a car driving around the city, 5 up. And he'd called for assistance. So we'd driven round, and it was stopped somewhere at the back of Fenchurch Street, I think. And when we got there, there was 2 people sat in the front and 2 in the back, and those 4 were like, I've just recently watched your Britain's Hardest Men Amazon show, which is great, by the way. But these 4 guys were like that, proper big, heavy guys that you wouldn't want to mess with. professional criminals, in my experience. And then tucked into the middle of them was a thin guy, very young, possibly a student, holding onto a computer bag. And the thing that made it unusual is the four big guys didn't say a word. They knew as soon as they were stopped by police, shut up, don't say anything. The guy in the middle was absolutely bricking it. So we got them out of the car, and these four big guys, good as gold, didn't know what they'd done, but they were being nicked. So we took them for the, right, well, who's having this computer? Oh, well, you know, they're like, well, nothing to do with me, mate. Nothing to do with me. So, right, you're all nicked for the computer. Took them in, and they downloaded the computer, which took a bit of time in them days, but we did download the computer. And it turned out that the plans for the Rolls-Royce brand new engine was on the computer. And these guys had broke into wherever it was being held, got the IT expert to download it onto a computer, and we're then going to say, so it was like an industrial espionage job.
Wow.
I know, and if you imagine the price of that, even though it's plans on a computer, 10, 20 million pounds worth of plans, but these big four, bruisers, they were like proper. I don't think I've come across proper criminals like that before. They've been brought in possibly from around the country just to get this done.
Wow.
And what a job that was, yeah.
So did they get sentenced for that, do you know?
Again, yes, probably. Again,
on.
I was a PC then. It was passed on to CID. But the City of London would get these massive jobs occasionally that, that were really quite interesting.
Any other incidents before we move on to your next position? So say a suspect had links to guards and male escorts.
Yeah, so that was the foundation for the book. So we're into what became known as Operation Impulse then. So I was a young PC. We'd have the entry points. I found it much more interesting dealing with prisoners than it was studying the entry points. So generally I'd get prisoners, stopping cars, crime in transit, people with stolen goods, people with green in the car, whatever. And I'd got a particular arrest, and I was moving the green to the laboratory to get tested. And the laboratory was at Wood Street, and it was just near the Barbican. So the Barbican is a block of 3 very exclusive flats in the City of London. They're the only residential places in the City of London. And a call came out of a male being stabbed. So it was literally 5 minutes from where I was. So I thought, I'm going to go to that. So I called up, I'm going to make my way. Came out, went up to the Barbican, got the flat number, went up to the flat, and because it's the Barbican and a lot of glamorous type people there, I walked along to this door that was open, and outside was this tall, thin, blonde lady who later turned out to be a German model. And so you can imagine what she looked like. But she was just going, in there, in there, in there. So I went into the room, and there was a sign of disturbance in this flat in the main living room. And I went into the bathroom, and the bathroom was tiled completely in white. So white walls, white floor, and then in the bath is a male with 3 stab wounds. But the whole place is covered in his blood. I remember the blood is in the grouting. It's all in the bath. It's all over the place. So this, but he's still got his glasses on, but other than that, he's completely naked. And I start getting towels, and I ask this lady, "Can you get me some more towels? Get me anything?" And I just start putting pressure on. And I call up and say, "We've got a male, stabbed in the bath, life-threatening. We need ambulance. Can get other people here." So I apply the towels, and I'm just trying to keep him alive, talking to him, keep him alive. Towels are filling up with blood, but I apply the pressure. The bath is helping because it's something solid to push against. Firearms cops start turning off, and you shouldn't laugh at these things because someone is in a massive bout of stress, nearly dying, but it's the things that stick in your mind. So the firearms officer turns around and looks into the bathroom. "You all right, mate?" "Yeah, I just need more bandages, get me some bandages." Then looks around and sees this German model, and he's gone from that point. Berry goes forward onto his head, gun comes up, and he's off talking to the German model. And I'm trying to keep this bloke alive.
Oh my goodness!
To try and keep him with us. So yeah, the guy's who's the victim, is saved. He goes for an operation. He is saved. The next day I go to the debrief, and this is quite unusual for the city. They've got an attempted murder, so they don't normally get that in the city, particularly last time. This is 1995. And I go along to the debrief as the officer that's been with this guy. And we get more information the next morning, and it says that the chap had survived. He's done an e-fit of the suspect. The suspect says he was a soldier, and the suspect had picked our victim up in a gay bar on Charing Cross Road, and he'd said that the victim had said that the suspect was in my old regiment many years before me, but I was put onto the inquiry as a temporary detective constable with the job of military liaison. So going to the regiments in London to try and find out how this suspect was, because it was known he was part of the Guards division. So there was quite a small incident room, and it was still the days then where there was a DS in charge. You'd get your actions, and you'd go out and do the actions, and I had the actions for the military inquiry. At the end of the day, you'd come back and the DS would pull up on a drawer and get out a whiskey and, right, what's happened today? I mean, it was still like that back then. But I carried on with my inquiries, and basically my job was to go around the barracks with this e-fit and say, does anybody know this person? And I went back to Knightsbridge Barracks. I wasn't given a great reception, but I basically read a bit of a riot act and said, look, I know all your scams here. I was here for best part of 2 years. I can get cops outside the door. I can get cops searching every car coming in and out if I need to. Somebody knows who this person is. He's going to kill again, or he might kill somebody next time. I need to know who it is. And I did get a name. So then the inquiry then moved to trying to find this guy. But when I got this name, the person who told me, he told me about this this practice of what was called company taking. So it's perhaps no big secret that soldiers from all regiments and all members of the armed forces from about the 1930s onwards were involved in male prostitution in London. So they used to call it the perils of Piccadilly. And what happened in the late 70s, early 80s, there was this company taking scene where if a company, big bank, whatever happens to be, media companies, were trying to impress clients, they'd have these parties and they'd get what was termed wallpaper. So they'd get good-looking girls to stand around. Then they started to say, well, we'll get some good-looking guys to stand around. So they used to go to the Guards regiments, big strapping 6-foot guys, and they would be invited on to these parties and they get free drink and talk to the clientels. And for years, it was, you could argue it was maybe immoral, but it wasn't illegal. But then something changed, and it started to move into prostitution rings. And the males that were being caught at these parties were, on some occasions, being forced into male prostitution. And it appears that our suspect, George, I think we're going to refer to him as, was involved in that. And the person who told me his name said, yeah, George was heavily involved in that. He was never right since. He'd had trouble when he was at Knightsbridge first time round. You need to look at him. So we started to put out pictures of him, started to circulate him on Police National Computer, trying to get hold of him before he hurt somebody else. And then then it occurred to me that if this was going on, there must be a file somewhere. The Royal Military Police Special Investigation Branch must have made a file on it. So I made an appointment to see the Lord Provost Marshal, who was the highest ranked military policeman in the land, and he was based at Colchester. And I went along to see him one day, big oak office, all the big leather chairs.
Hey, do you know what that sound means? Ooh, that's something I've been hearing a lot lately. I can't help but love that. That's what I hear when I make another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. The Pokemon business I've recently started with someone is absolutely thriving thanks to Shopify. Shopify accepts all kinds of payments, and sometimes it's complex when you get on a platform, but their dashboard makes it completely simple. Covering all your sales channels from a shop-front-ready POS system to its all-in-one e-commerce platform, Shopify even gets you selling across social media marketplaces like Facebook, Insta, TikTok, and YouTube. Full of the industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth, Shopify gives you complete control over your business and your brand without learning new skills in design or coding. And thanks to award-winning help and with an extensive business course library, Shopify is ready to support your success every step of the way. So when it comes to dealing with people all over the world, Shopify is absolutely enabling us to smash it with our Pokemon business. Before Shopify, our Pokemon card business was in the dark ages. It's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. This is Possibility powered by Shopify. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/Sean, SHAUN, all lowercase. Go to shopify.co.uk/Sean, SHAUN to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.co.uk/Sean. Link in description box below this video on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Back to the podcast.
Pictures of all behind him. Very, very well-spoken, educated chap, as you'd expect. Very powerful man in his way. And I explained what was going on, and I was a detective from the City of London Police, and we were investigating this. And I said, I'd like to see the company taking file. And he said to me, "That's fine, officer. Have you got a court order?" And I was, "Well, no, I haven't." And I said, "But I can go and get one if you want me to." And he said, "Look, we both know you're never going to get it." He says, "You're never going to get this file." And his words were, "It reaches all the way to royalty," is what he'd said to me.
Wow.
And that's as far as I knew.
Oh.
And so we were never going to get that file. Inquiries are going on, and our suspect George, he was originally seen, I think, or spotted in a gay nightclub in Brighton, using our posters that we'd put out. That was rang in. I think he was detained in Brighton after a bit of a chase. He was then shown on P&C as being wanted for, he's absconded a 6-year sentence for robbery in Windsor. So he was moved to Windsor. Windsor picked up on the fact that we wanted him, City of London Police wanted him for the attempted murder of our victim. And he was moved up. At that point, the detectives took over it, the regular detectives, so they dealt with him. But he was brought up to Snow Hill Police Station for a period of time, and the jailer that worked there knew I'd been involved in the case, and said, "Well, I'm due to take him his dinner. Do you want to go and take him his dinner? Go back into uniform, take him his dinner. Then at least you can see him face to face, sort of thing." So I did that. I went into the cell, didn't mention anything about the case, and didn't really say anything to him other than, "Here's your dinner. How you finding things?" Yeah, fine. Cheers. Have you got another blanket? Yeah, no problem. I can get you a blanket, sort of stuff. But I did get to see him. So that was dealt with. Got a very nice letter of appreciation for getting his name into the system. He went to court. He got a life sentence, which back then, incredibly, was only 16 years for an attempt murder. He admitted to kicking someone to death in Amsterdam.
What?
Yeah, but there was never any proof that he did it, but chances are he did do it. He was staying in Tattershall's Castle, which was a pub in in Hampstead Heath. We searched where he was staying. We found, weirdly, the knife that he'd used to stab somebody, and a list of high-profile homosexual males that he intended to kill or hurt. And he fully admitted that he was going to intend it to be a serial killer. And he blamed his experiences in the army involving company taking back in the 80s. So something stuck in there in my head that one day that'd make a great book.
Definitely.
Make a good story.
Yeah.
So I was carrying, what became 96 around for about 20 years. And what I did with the book is I combined two elements of my life, that investigation and my time as a level 2 undercover officer, and sort of melded them together to produce a fictional account. It's a work of fiction, but it's based on the Operation Impulse. It's based on the Colin Island murders. I looked at the murders that were happening at that time in London. It's set against the backdrop of Euro 96, which is where the title comes from. So yeah, I had it in mind that would make a good story one day.
Definitely. And the link for 96 is in the description box. All right, so the next one then is you get transferred to the Met, King's Cross Crime Squad, and your friend ends his life?
Yeah, so I transferred to the Met. I felt I'd done what I could with the city. City London Police is a great organisation, fantastic people, but it was either all or nothing, and I wanted a constant flow. I had ideas of getting involved in covert operations, and I felt that was the place where I wanted to be. So I transferred, went to Islington as a uniform officer for a few years, which was very, very interesting place to work. Islington, you have one hand, you've got these very expensive, exclusive houses of Tony Blair was living there, Moore and places, people like that. And then you had these estates like the Caledonia Estate, the Marquis Estate. I know it's an area you know, but and they one tend to fed off the other. You've got Upper Street with all the bars there. It's a really interesting place. Constant. I remember we had so on the Millennium. We sat at the back of Smithfield Meat Market, all our cars, and someone passed around a drink, which I'm sure was lemonade, Sean. And we had a quick drink of this lemonade, and then we all got sent to a call, which was the second call ever in the Millennium, and it was a domestic. And we went to this domestic that was going on, and it was African guy that had beaten up his partner, and at midnight we were all seeing the fireworks that were coming in from the river. About 3 minutes past midnight, I'm rolling around in a bedroom floor with this black chap who's trying to get away from me, and it was just really surreal. And he's nicked, but we think that was the first ever domestic of the new millennium. It's a bit sad for humanity, But yeah, so I was at Islington for a bit, really, again, really, really good team. But I wanted to go into the covert world, so I went to the King's Cross Crime Squad, which I talked about a bit earlier. Very work hard, play hard. Very, very work hard, play hard. So the first day, you turn up there and you get given all this kit, and they say, right, we've got a briefing in the annex at 9 o'clock. So you go down from the station, go to the annex, and they basically say, right, everyone's going to take a day off from now, sign this shit. So you took a day off, and the annex was basically a pub, and you were there, and it was big drinking culture back then. And it wasn't, it was clever of the DSs, because there was 3 of us all joined at a new time. You're getting involved with very, very tight unit. So it was a way of breaking the ice. You had to stand up, tell a joke on the table. They were betting which side a packet of crisps would land for £20 and things like this. And you basically just got a few bevies down throughout that day. Next day you come back in, it's full on. you're working. You might start work at 8 o'clock in the morning, do a few patrols. Suddenly, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, somebody's moving drugs from one address to the other address. We'd sit up on it. We'd what was termed a jump on. We would get this information in. We would spot the drug dealer that was moving, and then we would take them out, and then do all the searches where they come from, and that would take you to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning dealing with it. You'd get up at 8 o'clock and you'd do it again, and you'd be hanging around. You slept in the station. It's very often. You'd be off down to Heathrow Airport because you got some information there, going around King's Cross. So it was, and then that was my first exposure of test purchase operations, which is now called Level 2 undercover operations. And it's this idea that police officers would go out and buy drugs or stolen property or firearms from people. And the test purchase element comes from the fact, is it actually stolen? You're testing the evidence, sort of thing. And we used to run a lot of them operations around King's Cross. And I'd be responsible for getting them to court and doing the files and dealing with the prisoners, etc. But I thought there was something in me that thought, I think I could do the Level 2 work. I think I could do the test purchase work. So I applied to go on a course. So you get sent to Hendon, and there was 45 of us. You to get there on a Sunday night, and there's like 45 of you in this big classroom, and they talk to you, give you lessons, lectures till about midnight. Then they would say, "Oh, we're going to have a corridor party," and they get you out in the corridor, and there's alcohol there, and they're watching to see who goes to the alcohol and who doesn't. So I always thought, I'm not going to start drinking now. Not if I'm back up with this. Some of them did. They went there in the morning. They'd been gone. You do a whole lot of lectures like next day, and it's terms for drug use, weights and measures, how to roll a spliff so you don't look out of place. The law is massive. You're in a funny world, and I do talk about it in the book about on one side of your brain you're having to be like a drug user and fit in. The other side of your brain, you're a cop thinking of all the legal implications that everything you do. And it is a challenging course. And the way that they do it is they give you lectures throughout the day. When you get to 5 o'clock, they say, right, here's your scenarios. Go off to this part of the camp, and you'll see somebody there, and you'll go up and there's someone to say, right, you're going to walk into a room. There's a chap in there. It's a pub. Imagine it's a pub. You've got to try and get a telephone number from that bloke. So you walk into a room a bit like this. You sit down. There's lots of acting skills. Pretend you talk. How are you doing, mate? Yeah, okay. Have you got a light? Anything? And then you just start building a rapport. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Give us your number, and we'll sort something. Okay. So you go back out. You get debriefed. Did you get a number? Yes. What else did you find out? Okay. And then they say to you, okay, go to room 4C. So you find 4C. You walk into a room, and you see other people in the course there, and you sit down. You think, well, what's happening here? And anyway, someone comes in for the instructors, come in and say, right, you've all passed. Congratulations. You then realise, and it's like a 50-50 audition rate, that everybody who was in that room has gone. And when you go back to your accommodation, they've all gone already. And it keeps going like this, scenario after scenario. And I got one. And one thing I think did help me is I got one, right, you're going to meet somebody in a car. They're going to come out of the car, and you're going to try and buy drugs for them. And I was walking down to where this meet was going to be, and there was some builders actually working on it, and there was a pair of workies gloves. So I thought, they might be quite a good prop. So I picked up the workies glove and stuck them in my back pocket. So I make these people come out of the car, and of course they're giving you a hard time because they want to put you in the press. Why are you here? Well, you're not from London. You're from up north somewhere. Oh, I'm working here, mate. No, I've got my gloves. I'm working here, and I think they liked that. That was used my initiative. So did the mock deal, if you like. Okay, good. What details did you get? Go to this room. So it keeps going down and going down and going like that. So you're constantly under pressure, wondering, sat in a room thinking, well, am I in the failed one or am I in the passed one? Until eventually there was about 10 of us left. And the very last day, it's all caught. So on the deployments you've had, these practice deployments you have different sets of notebooks, and then you go into a mock court. And the instructors are grilling you and they're giving you a really hard time. Well, why did you say this? I put it to you, officer, that you were sharing that, and you encouraged my client to buy these drugs, and they didn't want to sell these drugs, and you've got to just be very black and white and stick to your evidence. Anyway, I passed it, and I was then attached to SO10, which is the covert unit, and from there, then I did a number of different deployments.
Any hairy situations?
Yeah, I mean, it is the main thing you get is fear beforehand. You get your stomach turning, and because you've seen the videos where people have been strip searched, you've seen the videos where people have been bundled off into cars, and you're thinking, is this going to happen to me? So yeah, I had a couple. I was once pulled into a telephone kiosk by somebody who I was trying to buy off his mate, but this other guy took a dislike to me, and he was trying to so they used to make pipes out of, I'm allowed to say that, white pipes.
Go for it, yeah.
Out of miniatures, alcoholic miniatures, and they put gauze in there, etc. And this guy, Jamaican, generally we were buying from Jamaicans about that time, so this would have been 2000s, and he was trying to put a pipe in my mouth and light it, and I was keeping him away, just pushing away. But fortunately, you have people around you that are going to keep an eye on you, and one of them came up and pretended to use the phone. What are you two junkies doing in here? Get out, sort of thing, to give me a chance to run off. So I managed to run off, and then another time. I was working on a job near White City. I used to walk past the Queen's Park Rangers ground every day to go to work. And as I was to go up to what the term a front line, which was generally a big line of shops, and it was a mixture of Jamaican and so some of the Jamaicans you'd see, they'd literally have the Miami Penitentiary underwear on, like they'd have their tracksuit bottoms really low, and you could see Miami Penitentiary on their underwear, because they would have literally got out of jail at Miami, been flown straight over to London to start dealing over here. But there was second generation Jamaicans as well, or English guys, and then some of the nicest people I met were Jamaican drug dealers. They were like really up for a good time and were very friendly most of the time. But there was always this edge to them. And I was walking past Queen's Park Rangers ground, and I got a call on one of my mobiles. Right, take a seat, just wait there, pretend you're begging. So I went down as if I was begging, and then the guy I knew I was dealing off, I knew his car, and I'd bought from him before. He drove past, but he was now wearing a bulletproof vest in this car, and he drove past me. I thought, well, that's why they've asked me to stop. Have you seen this? Yes, I've seen it. What do you want to do? I'll go on. I'll keep going. So I walked up the front line and walked onto these sets of streets. And this is about me, I don't know, a second or third buy from him. And as I was walking up, he turned to the bloke he was talking to, and he put his two fingers together and the thumb out in the sort of traditional gun sign, and he pointed it at the bloke he was talking to's head and went bam, bam, like that. And then he used the same two fingers to gesture towards me. I thought, oh no, this doesn't look great. And he'd served me up before, but it'd always been all right. So I thought I'll go with it. I've got a bit of protection around me. I'll go with it. But he started walking around the back of the shops as well, and I thought, oh, this isn't great. But I thought, well, I'll keep going. I'll front it out. And you can imagine the protection. I think he's gone around the back of the shops now. So I went around the back of the shops, and he just served me up. I don't know what. There was no hassle. He showed them the money, hand over what I was buying. into my pocket and we walked back round. So whether he mistook me for somebody else and he was just telling the story, maybe he wanted to put a frighteners on me, I don't know, but that was hairy. Walking around that corner, I thought, well, there's other people out there waiting for me. If I turned and run, that'd be the game up. So I'd have to just what would you, if you're desperate for your brown and your white, you would just go with it. If you were a proper drug user, you'd go with it. You wouldn't turn and run for that. So I fronted it out. Unfortunately, it was okay.
What about when you were doing the jump-ons? Did you get a resistance, weapons, dog attacks, anything like that?
So what had started to happen? We didn't really. It was weirdly. It was, I think the sergeant who was in charge of the unit, who was from my neck of the woods, thought I was a bit of a nutter. So generally, it was my job to walk up to these people first and start a fight with them, jump on them first, and then loads of people come out the woodwork. So they would struggle a little bit, but what started to happen is they started to put hypodermic needles around their clothing.
Oh.
So they used to, because if they wear tracksuit bottoms, they'd put needles into where your cords were, or they'd put them underneath their arms. So they had to be careful as well. But the whole idea was, it was like an arms race. So we started to jump on the drug dealers. They started to use hypodermic needles. We started to use metal chain gloves so we could grab them. So it was constantly going up as to what you were done. I've got to be honest, very often there were young, terrified lads that had got them in, that had listened to the press about the big life of a drug dealer, and then suddenly they're hit with reality of actually that it's a really dangerous job, not only from the police, but from other drug dealers. A lot of them are in debt bondage. They're absolutely terrified. And generally, once you got hold of them, and you would always say to them, look, it's over, mate, it's over. You can relax. You just stop and let the process go. It's over. Very often there was a sense of relief. Great, I've been nicked now. No one's going to bother me anymore. I'll be able to tell my main distributor that, look, I've got the police all over me now. And once we got them back into the cell and we start processing them, they wouldn't necessarily cooperate in an interview, but they wouldn't be great. And very often the mum would come up and pick them up, and they'd be absolutely terrified of their mum. And you could argue we were cutting the grass, but you've got to do something. You can't just let it go. You've got to do something. You've got to do something, even if it's just taking 50 bags of white off the street. It was doing something. Maybe we did enough to stop that lad go from doing it again.
So why the transfer to East Midlands, please?
So we got married. I met a girl who was from the Midlands, looked at various forces, went to the East Midlands Police. I went to a county force there, and the perception is it's very quiet, but it was very, very different. There was far fewer of you from London. They're very stretched. You have rural policing, which is very different from urban policing. You have the big cities, Nottingham, Leicester, and Derby, which is a big town. Then you've got the market towns around that as well. So there's a real variety there. Certainly Nottingham and Leicester has the same inner city problems as anywhere else. Leicester at one point, and Nottingham was known as Shottingham for a long time because the firearms are there. Leicester had the fourth highest violence rate in the country, violence figures in the country. Same problems, but there's just a lot less of you. Different way of policing, really. I was still doing the level 2 test purchase work when I went up there, so worked in places on Northampton and Preston. I started working on courses, so teaching other test purchasers how to do it. They had a different way of doing their training there. They started off with 7 or 8, and they would maybe pass out 4 or 5, so they were a lot more selective. So it was really, we couldn't really afford a house in London. Knew we were going to sort of move out. So that's took me up there.
Did you always get away with this undercover stuff, or did you get rumbled?
I think I got rumbled once when I was in London, and it was my own fault because I was working at Battersea, and I walked onto a plot, which was an estate, and there were 7 or 8 guys around a car, and I was just too overconfident. I think I'd been doing it for a while, so I was a bit blatant. So I effectively went up to these people on the car. Oh, what's wrong with your car? Got any drugs? And it didn't go down very well. No, the FU sort of thing, clear off. Okay, so walked off, carried on through the estate, walked back. Undeterred, I went back the next day. I went on the estate, but this time I was in, like, you have these big estates and you've got your one stop and your shops in the middle and a few seats, everything in the precinct. And I walked back to the estate. I walked back through towards the shop, and there was a guy that was sat on one of these chairs, like concrete chairs, and he was come over. I went, all right, mate. And I used to use the name Richie. All right, Richie, how you doing? Yeah, fine, mate. How are you? Anyone about today? Anyone serving up? He said, mate, you got to get out. You got to get out of here. He says, so-and-so is convinced you're a cop. What? He's absolutely convinced you're a cop. He says, if he sees you, he's going to stab you. Really? Yeah. He said, look, he's coming now. I turned around and this guy was walking across the precinct. So I walked into this, like, shop, this one shop, and just kept walking, walked through the back, got out onto the street and walked round. And I went back to where the operation was. And this happens sometimes. Sometimes your face doesn't fit, or you just get off to a bad start. And I said, look, I'm burnt here, really. I don't think I can go out. Yeah, fine, no problem. Try somebody else.
So what was your first big challenge or incident in East Midlands?
Well, it was... I was there for quite a long time. I was there sort of 20 years.
Grief.
I started off in a bit of a market town. Again, like I say, very, very different. You'd go to arrest... I remember going to arrest somebody once for drink driving. He was in a white van. And he was driving around doing donuts effectively in his white van in the middle of the town centre sort of thing, going to kill himself or somebody. Eventually managed to stop it with my butt in the cars, got in a car in front of him, got his keys, got him out. Absolutely, paralytic when we got him out. We stood by the side of the road waiting for a van to turn up. Another car comes up, 4 blokes get out the back. What's happening? Sorry, mate, he's been arrested for drink driving. We're going to just have to take him in. No, he's not. No, he's coming with us. And this was like, no, you don't seem to understand. This is completely new to me. He's been arrested. He's in the custody of the police. We're going to take... No, he's going to come to us. So they start to try and get him free. There's 2 of us, there's 4 of them. There's a bloke who's drunk. He keeps falling to the floor. Get our batons out and start battering them off, trying to get him off. They're trying to bundle him in the car. We're trying to pull him back. And eventually another car turns up and they get in the car and drive off. But that was like such an eye-opener to me. And they will challenge the police, as you get up into the counties. I found it more violent. People were more likely to front you out, more likely to get violent with you because they knew that there wasn't many of you around.
Is that because they were trying to rescue their friend, or they were trying to kidnap the guy?
They were going to rescue him.
Yeah.
It was like, no, you're not arresting him. We're taking him home. He'll be fine with us. No, you don't. You don't seem to understand. He's been arrested for drink drive. And then there would be times. I remember going up to this one village, and there was a bloke trying to break into a car, and I went to, again, perhaps a bit naively, went to grab him. Right, you're arrested. Can I have backup, please? Certainly, it would be about 35 minutes. So there's this realisation that, I can try and get him into cuffs. And this bloke realises, I'll take this for 35 minutes. I can. So he's running after me with the screwdriver, and then I'm running around the car. Then I'm running after him, trying to get the cuffs on, and we're just trying to have this, standoff until I can get more cops to me and chasing him around. And yeah, so it was very different. But good, I've been very lucky with teams. I had a really good team, back you up. All generally all got on. People try and get to you. So
DS robbery squad, serious crime.
yeah. So after a period of time, I was moved to a DS. Originally, I was the investigation skills team, so I was teaching detectives in the CID course and vulnerable interview courses and investigative interviewing, and that was great. I went to Yemen during that period. And
Yemen?
I was.
What's that about?
So at that time, so this was 2006, they were trying to build up relations with Yemen. Basically, America had invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, and Yemen was next on the list. So they had a president there called Ali Abdul Saleh. And it's all very tribal out there, and it's what they call a green police, so it's part of their military. But the Brits and the Americans were trying to build bridges with the Yemeni government. So they arranged, somebody said, well, we'll send you some people out that will teach your counter-terrorist police how to properly interviewing without brutality, which is generally what they did. So myself and another DS from Suffolk, we went out and Sussex, went out, and we spent 5 weeks out there. We ran 2-week courses, and it was really interesting. It's fundamental Islamic State. Still had the old we went to Sana'a, which was the capital. We when we go out there, realised nothing was done. We were starting from scratch. Understood the tribal nature of everything. So Ali Abdul Saleh was the president. The Americans had said, right, you've got to have free elections, which was a joke. But whilst we were out there, the elections were on, so the UN were out there. Tensions were really high anyway. But we ran these 2 courses. The police everyone chewed a thing called cat, if I'm meant to mention it, which is a leaf which has a bit like speed type effects. And they have these big pouches in their mouth. And the effect is that between 8 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning, they're hyper. But we were working on Western time because they would all sit around and talk and everything. So we had to get them in a classroom at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they'd all be more or less wanting to go to sleep because they'd been up all night on cat. But we managed to run this course. We had a couple of good interpreters, translated all the British police, pink and fluffy, if you want a better word, of interviewing into Arabic, and it worked quite well. It did translate, and the ways of doing it. So we ran these two courses. We were on Yemeni TV when we were handing over, but there was a few. So there was a riot that kicked off in Sana'a because of all the elections that was going on, and we were in this hotel, and there was literally a riot out the front. And I'll never forget that how they work there. There was a liaison officer, military officer, and he came to see us in the hotel as this riot kicked off, and there was literally things being thrown, and the windows were going through, and like Carry On the Khyber, when the place is falling down, and everyone still would like some more tea, and yeah, it was a bit like that, and we were having these drinking these cups of tea and stuff. So how did class go today? Oh yeah, it was fine. Smash, bam, all these noises going off, and then his son was there. This military officer, his son was there, and he said, I can't remember his name, but he said, can you just go and check on the riot? And he went, yes, Dad. And this military officer took out his pistol, handed it to his 16-year-old son. The 16-year-old son cocked it, stuck it in his back, and walked out into this riot to see what was going on. And then came back about 5 minutes later and said, we think about 5 minutes it'll burn itself out and we can move on. So it was really strange. And then we went to... The only place you could get a drink. We once went to a Sheraton hotel, and I love Americans and I love America. I've been there a few times. absolutely no issues with them. But what we found over there is that there was a certain element that was quite rude to people. And we went to get this, went to try and get a drink in the Sheraton Hotel. In Yemen, everyone walks around with an AK-47. Everyone's got this big daggers on their belt sort of thing. And we were in this bar, and a girl, I presume American girl, walked past in a bikini, went up to the bar. So as blokes do, you sort of look up, then go back to talking. These two Yemeni guys had looked at her as well, and out of nowhere, this American guy came up in just a pair of trunks and walked over to these two guys that had AK-47s on the table and started berating them for looking at his girlfriend. And what are you doing, man? What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you looking at my girl? Why are you looking at my... He didn't come to us, but he had... And fortunately, I don't think these two Yemeni guys knew what he was saying, because they were just sort of looking at him and laughing. But I thought, that is either a brave or really silly thing to do. So after that, we thought, well, we're not going to get any drinks in hotels anymore. So we started using the embassies. So the British embassy served a bit of alcohol, and the American embassy did. And we made some really good friends there. The people in the American embassy were absolutely fantastic. Marine Corps were there. Couldn't do enough for us once we found out we were Brit cops. We used to get in, have a drink, and one of them said, "Oh, we're going on I think they called it a hack or something, but it's basically where you go running around the outdoors, and someone leaves a trail using blue paint, and you follow his blue paint." And we thought, oh, well, that'll be good. It'd be an evening out. So we jumped into these, met at the embassy, jumped into these big 4x4s. There was like a big convoy of 6 or 7 of them. Drove out to this Yemeni police station, and parked up the vehicles in the front. And then everyone goes for a run, and there was Marines there. We talked to the Marines. There's the, media attaches or whatever they are, which are Secret Service, all this sort of stuff. And it was really nice. And then we were running around, and it's a good bit of exercise. And as we were coming back to the Yemeni police station, I look up, and then on the horizon, I see these 4 explosions going off, like up into the air. And then out of the police station, all these Yemeni police start running out and going up this hill to find out what's going on. And this American, and I apologise to you American listeners for my accent, but this big American Marine sergeant says, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the police station is under attack. Please make your way to the vehicles." So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to this vehicle. So everyone's running the vehicle, and they get the drivers. We all go off on convoy. We get onto this road. We do a left up the road as if we're going over a bridge. As we get up to the top of this road, we realise the bridge isn't finished. So we've just come to a dead end. So we all, there's 8 Range Rovers all having to reverse back with their 4 ways going in the lights, thereby becoming the biggest target in southern or northern Yemen at that time. So yeah, so it was amusing more than anything, but at the time you think it was a crazy place. It was a crazy place.
Did you not get intimidated in environments like that?
No, we didn't really. No, I mean, you have to be pretty confident anyway to do that sort of job. And we'd been really well looked after. If anything went wrong, we would go to this officer, and they would sort us out. And it was just like another experience. You're going to take it as much as you can, really. But also whilst we were there, a young lad came up to us and said, "I've been handing this through an interpreter. I've been handed a murder investigation. Two bodies were found in a well in the village, which I'm responsible for, tied up 2 young lads, and I don't know what to do about it." And we were like, "Oh, yeah, that is a problem, isn't it? I mean, how do you deal with that? Because obviously they're in the middle of nowhere. There's no CCTV. There's very, very basic investigation resources at your disposal." So we did sit down with him and say, right, you need to work on last person seeing alive, first person finding, all your house to house that covers that well. Where's the bodies? Oh, bodies have gone off somewhere. I don't know where the bodies are. Well, get your bodies looked at. Find out what the knots were like, what winds of the rope come from. And we basically did him this double murder investigation plan. And between doing our course, he was off trying to do this. I mean, I never found out what happened, but again, I thought, well, that'd be another good story. A good day for a book.
So after Yemen, there was 2.5 years in TP operations, and was that dangerous?
That one, so that one I was running them really. So I had people working for me that were undercover officers. I had safety teams, evidential teams, in interviewing teams, and we worked throughout the East Midlands. And
did any of them get rumbled?
No, they were very good. Some characters. There were some characters. There was one guy who turned up and started cutting his face, so he looked more authentic. And I said, I'm not having you. That's a silly. And he was Scottish, and he went in to get ready. So you all have your clothing, you're buying clothing, which is horrible stuff, depending on what your character is. But I was generally the rougher end of the market. It's perhaps not surprising, but so I'd have an old jacket, old jeans, old trainers. You'd pour special brew over your clothing. Some people used to put urine on it and all this sort of stuff just so you'd fit in. I had a horrible sleeping bag, which I've drawn in the book. I was a sleeping bag and a backpack, and so I used to look the part, wear an earring, not shave for a few days. But some of them used to take to a massive extent, not shower for months on end, and my wife wouldn't put up with that sort of stuff. But one guy turned up to be a UC for us, and he said, I'm just going to get ready. And then he came out and he had a big cut, and he said, how have you done that, mate? He said, I did it with I thought he'd fallen over in the bathroom or something. So I did it with a razor. Why? Well, because, and he said, drunks you see around the city centre, they've all been fighting, and no, that's not good. So we'll have a chat about that, but he didn't stay long. So they are characters, and you need to be a special character to do that job. And sometimes particularly if they're very experienced, they think they know best, but when you go up that level, you've got the whole picture, and if they go off script or they go out of their parameters, you've set them, that can cause loads of problems elsewhere. But it was rewarding. You get to the arrest phase, you do 50 arrests, over 5 or 6 days. You get a load of people through court that nearly always plead guilty because the evidence is that good. So it's extremely rewarding. But the danger side of me, no, I'm not really taking the risks at that point.
Then you become the force knife crime lead. Yeah,
so I spent a bit of time as a staff officer for the senior officer team, and so staff officer. So the chap I used to be a staff officer for, work with, he was. I think I mentioned I had 3 friends that committed suicide, and unfortunately he was the last one.
Oh, dear.
But years before that, when we worked together, brilliant guy as well, absolutely amazing guy. I worked as a staff officer, so I used to help with him. And we went to a period in the city I was working with where we had 8 knife murders in a 6-week period, which
young people.
Two of them were domestics, so they're a bit outliers, but the others were drugs debt, young black or Asian males. And that we would normally get that amount in a year, and we'd had 6 in 8 weeks. Over, weirdly, January, February sort of time as well, 2017 or so. And so I came involved in there because there would always be a gold meeting where you would have the detective, the murder teams investigated, but they would always have a silver and a gold, a senior officer that'd be responsible as well. So we met the families on occasions, very hands-on, the senior officer team where I was working. I remember a senior investigating officer that worked with the murder team saying if it wasn't for the skill of the surgeons, there'd probably be twice as many. And it was just got an absolute epidemic, really.
Was it tit for tat between 2 gangs?
Yeah, very often, or drug deals that have gone wrong, arguments over money. So it sort of combined then, really. So I became knife crime lead for my force, but I was also the force lead for stop and search. So stop and search, really, it has its critics, but it's a massive tool for a positive, a tool for good, in my opinion, for police officers. Now, it gets a bad press, but if it's there to stop young people killing themselves by searching them and taking that knife off the street, or even deterring them from carrying that knife, then in my professional opinion, it's worth everything that goes with it. But unfortunately, the stop and searches, just as we can reach this knife time epidemic, and this wasn't just in the East Midlands, this was London as well, because I used to sit on the National Working Group for Stop and Search and Knife Crime. Just as we got to this epidemic of knife crime, the government, in their wisdom, were trying to reduce the number of stop and searches. So I can name the politician if you want me to.
Go for it.
Yeah, so Theresa May was the Home Secretary at that time. And for whatever reason, I think she'd been badly advised. She was certainly listening to pressure groups, people like Stopwatch, that were just, as far as I could see, because I did go to a few meetings, just wanted to try and hamstring the police. But she took a lot of notice of them when she was Home Secretary and brought in this best use of stop and search scheme, which stated aim was to reduce the number of stop and searches by over-regulating it, making officers, over-scrutinising officers for the stops and searches they were doing, over-accountability. All it did is it meant another layer of bureaucracy, and it worked. So cops, 500 searches a month in a force area would go down to perhaps 30. It had a massive job. But meanwhile, and that was probably reflected across the country. Meanwhile, you've got knife crime epidemics, people being killed with knives, because partly, I think, is because the searches weren't being done. And there was the element of the racial angle, where young black male being disproportionately targeted. So what we would say to that is there were young black males were 4 times more likely to be searched than white males, but then young black males were 4 more times likely to be victims of knife crime. So that there was, in a way, it was proportionate to the threat that the police faced at that time. I can understand if you're a young black male in anywhere in a city and you're constantly being stopped by police, I get that, and somebody is misusing their power there. That shouldn't be happening. It should be intelligence-led. But at the other end of that, if that person is known to carry knives or is known to be involved in knife crime or drug crime, then there has to be some way of dealing with that individual. But what was happening was cops, rightly or wrongly, were backing way off from doing stop and search because they were getting criticised. Senior officers were pulling PCs into their offices to say, "Why have you done this stop and search?" We don't think that was, we didn't have the necessary grounds. So I spent a lot of time coming up with training packages as a knife crime coordinator, stop and search lead, training packages trying to get cops to understand what constitutes reasonable grounds to suspect, give them confidence in their training, understand behaviour, and understand what justifies a search, how to carry on any searches, how to record them properly. We did a lot of knife crime operations. I once put a knife arch in the middle of an estate, and put a knife archers at one end of the estate and drug dogs at the other, and ferried the people in the estate. And I had the PCC with me, came out, we thought it was great, and within 2-3 minutes we were running around trying to catch people that are trying to dump drugs and knives. It nearly ended in a riot, if I'm honest, because the locals didn't take to it very well, and we had people in cars that were being shook and everything. We managed to get everyone out safely, but it was the talk of that estate for months, if not years afterwards. The fact that we would do that shows that we didn't have any no-go zones, and I'll be honest, I didn't do it again. I think the risk assessment would have been too much, but we did do it, and then people didn't know if we were going to, is it going to be next week they're going to turn up with more drugs. We used to do lots of knife searches, knife operations. We did a knife search on a bridge that used to join two estates. One estate would find the other one. We lit up these knife arches like a Christmas tree, then do searches, and we once found a military intention tool that had been sharpened on one end. A group would come over, saw the knife arch, dumped it, which was the real... The X factor with a knife arch, really. You're very unlikely to get people going through it, but it puts people off enough that they dump the stuff that they're carrying, the weapons that they're carrying. And it was really rewarding work. Fortunately, that year we still had 4 more people die of knife crime, which is 4 too many. But we were on a rate of 6 in 8 weeks.
Robert, earlier on you said that the knife, from your experience, was extremely efficient at ending people's lives. Is that based on attending autopsies for these people who had been, died due to knife crime? Yeah, I mean,
it's just... that was my own personal opinion. That's what I found. I mean, knives have been around for thousands of years, and they are an efficient tool and easy to get, easy accessible, small. You don't need any skill to use it. And very often, I mean, for every person who died from a knife attack, there could be 10 stabbings. As a DS in serious crime, as I was, every weekend you'd walk into 3 or 4 different stabbings, and then there'd be another 3 or 4 in the night, and that was generally your core duties, sending people down hospitals, getting CCTV from area, taking witness statements. Was it, baddie against baddie sort of thing, which means you'd struggle with the statements and all this sort of stuff. And the strange thing is, we had been a team. Again, I know I like repeat myself, but I had an excellent CID team when I first took over as DS and serious crime team. But there wasn't many of us, 7 or 8. And you'd walk in and you'd have maybe 3 people that were in for serious crime. You'd have other ones that were victims in hospitals. You'd get another perhaps 2, 3 throughout the day, all being managed by relatively small teams. But if one of them dies, then you suddenly get major crime come in, and they will come in with fleets and fleets of people. And I had a terrible thing, but we once had a really busy weekend, and really busy weekend, and running out of staff, number of people in the bin, people that needed dealing with, people stabbing, and then a call came in, a woman had killed her own children with knives. They'd hidden underneath the bed, and she'd lost it and stabbed them both to death. The initial call came in. Oh, my God. Initial call came in. A woman stabbed 2 of her children. And I was thinking, how am I going to staff that? How am I going to staff this? I've got nobody left. And, it's to my internal shame, really. Then they said, the kids have died. And you're like... That is absolutely awful, terrible, but I'm not dealing with it anymore. It's going to somewhere. It's going to somewhere else.
Was that a mental health case?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have any other than the initial call coming into us to say this is happening. It's coming your way. But once the children had died, it was one of these ones. It was where my understanding was, and I don't know the massive amount of details. She couldn't face her children growing up in the world as it was. So she decided, she tried to kill herself, but didn't. Really, really terrible thing.
So for young people who are watching this, who are involved in knife crime, can you just tell them how easy it is to die?
It is easy because like they were saying, that. So a good example is the Lee Duffy case, which I know you've talked about.
Oh, yes.
Again, from my neck of the woods. So what happened with Lee Duffy is he went out, my understanding is he went out and he picked a fight with somebody, and that person stabbed him once underneath the armpits, so caught an artery. So what can happen in there? So and whether that, and I think he was the chap who did it was done for manslaughter rather than murder, which you can sort of see. But the thing with knives is you can catch anybody and catch an artery. If you're fighting or running away from somebody after that, you will bleed out in about 30 seconds to a minute. You'll have lost your critical mass of blood within 30 seconds. And that's how easy it is, and it ruins the lives either side. Somebody's lost their child, because they're very often their children, not much more than 18, if that. Then the person who'd done it, they're going to prison. They're not going to have much of a life now, even when they come out, and they're going to have that for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's so easily done. That's what the knife is designed to do. It's been designed, and nowadays, we used to spend a lot of time trying to find people who were selling them online, commando knives, and it got to a stage where the knives were even designer. They would be coloured. The handles would be coloured and lit up for children. So they used to look like Nerf guns, but with knives, and the blades were long, thin blades that were just designed to go through your ribs, to catch an artery down the top of your neck. So, yeah, it's just how many people go out intending to kill somebody else with a knife is probably a lot lower than how many actual people end up doing it, because it can be so easily done. And the good thing is we catch them. Very rarely we don't catch people that have committed murder with a knife. They've got CCTV every day. The forensics are so good now. Someone can also, bubble them up, top them in. So you're not going to get away with it. The risk is massive. And they could, and I said this at the time, I wrote a piece about stop and search a few years ago. The government could stop it overnight with a 5-year sentence automatically for carrying a knife. But they won't, because they know it disproportionately target young black men, and they haven't got the places in prison to do it. But I think it is worth having those people going to prison for 5 years. That message will get round within 6 months, and it would stop it. It would stop it.
How did you become aware of the Lee Duffy case, Robert?
He's from Middlesbrough, and I'm from that sort of area, so that was quite a high-profile knife crime incident. Yeah,
we've had a lot of people on over the years talking about Lee Duffy's life story as well. Quite fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so then you became a uniformed inspector?
Yeah, so I was a detective sergeant for about 15 years.
15 years?
Yeah, decided I'd get promoted, so went back into uniform, went through a few processes. I was almost given up. I went through, I think, about 3 processes. Eventually got promoted and spent a little bit of time back on as an operational inspector, response inspector. And then an opportunity came up for me to go into the control room as a control room inspector. So I did that, and then part of the role for that is initial tactical firearms commander and pursuit commander. So I did that for about 18 months. Really strange environment, the control room. Really strange. You would go from dealing with a firearms job to talking to people that had fallen out over who ate what in the fridge. It was just really strange. And it was okay. It was okay. I managed to get through it. Firearm stuff was very, very interesting. You go on a course, and I'm not carrying the guns. I'm setting strategy. I'm looking at legal implications, briefing the firearms teams. That in the main were excellent. Doing pursuits, which are very often more dangerous than the firearms jobs, where you're the pursuit commander. I think you had a traffic officer recently. They're excellent at these sort of things, fortunately, and you put your career in their hands when they're doing the chases and try and block people off. But they are fantastic at what they do.
So you were issuing the commands for that, were you?
I can start it off and give some parameters of what can and can't be used for the pursuits. You then hand it over to the experts. They will go and try and get the cat, but I can call it off as well. So if I think it's getting too dangerous, I can say, okay, let them go. Organise the helicopters. I once had a pursuit that went on 45 minutes, and it went across 3 counties. It started in one and finished in Thames Valley down near Oxford. And the idea is every time it goes across a county boundary, you offer it to the control inspector for that area, who of course says, no, you can keep it. You can keep it because the radios are so good and they don't want to touch it in case something happens. So we had one for like 45 minutes till we get them. And
did you get that guy?
Yeah, we got them. They very, very rarely get away.
What was he running from?
I can't remember. It started off, I think it was a robbery in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And then started off, went down south on the M1, then branched off went over to Thames Valley, really moving at speed. Cars were behind them through Warwickshire, ended up in Thames Valley. But I was just listening to it on the radio, got a helicopter up. The helicopters are invaluable, really. We'll always chase it. And sometimes if it was local, you could see on the CCTV how it ended. But I suppose the other thing that happened there was another friend of mine committed suicide while I was on duty, and he committed suicide. So I managed the initial part of that job. That was the second friend of mine that committed suicide, and that did play on my mind. Did play on my mind for a long time.
You were working with missing persons.
Yeah. So my last job, I wanted to go out as a detective. So I managed to get an opportunity to go as a detective inspector for my final year in the missing persons team, which was a real challenge, not particularly well resourced. But if you speak to people, they will say, well, missing persons are one down from homicide, really, because a lot of people turn up dead, an awful lot of risk. Child sexual abuse, girls going off from children's homes, being exploited, boys going off, being exploited within the county lines. You're trying to assess what the risk is to them whilst they're missing. We had girls that would come back with bruises on their necks, wouldn't speak to us, of course, but they turned up alive, so they're no longer missing persons. You wonder how often they would do that. People going off to commit suicide. It was always, you generally knew when they were going to do it. The rates for young male suicides is a disgrace, in terms of what's not done about it. But it tends to be young white males will commit suicide, or even middle-aged males, and they would generally leave all their bits on the table: car keys, bank details, wallet, change. If we got reports of that, they were probably already dead, and generally go off and hung themselves.
So if you've got like a list of missing persons, what realistically would you expect to solve?
Well, that's a good question.
Like what percent?
We'd solve a lot of them, but very often they came back to us. They'd come back to us. We'd use a lot of phone work, a lot of CCTV. I had a very dedicated staff that were excellent. There were, again, a lot of it was through COVID or the hangover of COVID. So they'd be running off their computers, patching themselves into phone records, patching themselves into CCTV records, doing a lot of it just from a desk, coordinating officers who were already massively busy. But every so often you'd get one that would turn to a murder. So you had to treat them all like they were murders. You had to put them in high, medium and low risk. Didn't get many low risks. They were medium and high, and then, you give them... I remember putting somebody in a medium risk, going to bed, thinking it over. No, I'm not happy, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, logging back on, I've changed my mind. I've got to put him to high risk. You're managing that risk day in, day out. But the percent, I think you'd maybe have maybe 20 or 30 on a board every day, and there'd be ones coming off and ones going on because they've turned up and new ones come on. I'd say maybe 10 of them were high risk. The rest would be mediums, 1 or 2 lows.
What if it was a child? Did you come across that?
Yeah. So we did used to get that, and then you would get the child that had wandered off from their mum or dad in a shopping centre, and then it's all hands to everyone stops what they're doing, gets down there, tries to find them. There were innocent sort of explanations, really. Generally, well, always we found them eventually. I didn't have one which was a abduction or anything. You used to get lots of rumours of abductions. There's always men in white vans, really. We'd go around, the rumour would start on the estate. There's a man in a white van trying to get kids in the back of the car. Fortunately didn't have any of them, but only through the grace of God, really. There was some, particularly the girls, were taking huge risks going around London. So going missing in the East Midlands, going to London, going to Edinburgh, Liverpool, Manchester, being sexually exploited. We had one that just disappeared just before I left, stepped out of our front door from a very nice Asian family, never been in trouble with the police before, went to school, disappeared. Just disappeared, stepped out the front door, no CCTV, no one had seen where she'd gone. A phone, when we found a phone, was going backwards and forwards between Bradford and Leeds, backwards and forwards. And I was convinced it was a murder, it was a homicide investigation. I took it to my superintendent. I haven't got the resources to deal with this. This needs to go to somebody else, major crime. For whatever reason, she took one look at it and said, no, it can stay with you. Fortunately, I had a very, very good intelligence DI who could help me with it. We put 2 officers up to Leeds and Bradford to try and find out what was going on. West Yorkshire Police helped us. But I was thinking she's going to turn up. She's going to turn up dead at the moment. And that phone is just in someone's car. Ran it, I think I've travelled up there, ran it for over a weekend. Monday morning she turns back up again.
Wow.
But had been sexually abused over the weekend, been passed around a ring of males. She basically just stepped into a car. But somebody she'd met on her phone, travelled down from Leeds, Bradford, picked her up, took her up there.
How old was she?
As I remember rightly, she was 15, 16.
Oh, God.
So she was a high-risk missing persons for straight away, and it's, you get that spidey sense, whatever you want to call it, that, well, this isn't good. But thankfully, she came back alive, but was in a terrible state, as you can imagine.
This is the danger of the phones and the internet, isn't it? They can access the kids, can't they? The predators.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the people that do this are experts at it. Your average paedophile is despicable and devious and knows exactly what to do. And until there's that education, a bit like the knife crime, there's that education to children about the dangers of it, because they can pretend to be anybody nowadays, and they will have, you've got this, the way AI is going to go, they're going to project themselves as whatever they want to be. So yeah, it is very, very sad. It still goes on now. We've no reason to believe it hasn't stopped, that exploitation of children. But yeah, so mainly I was with the missing person, but we used to overlap with all sorts of stuff in missing persons. It was very, very challenging, and I think as I did it, it was going from the control room to that. It was out of a frying pan into another hot frying pan, and it was rewarding in some ways as well, but it was very, very challenging. And then you come to finish, and there's no debrief, there's no safety net. I literally was doing high-risk missing persons reports on the morning I left the police, and then had to hand it up to somebody else. I didn't have anybody to take over from me. And that was like on the Wednesday. I handed me kit on the Thursday. I went for a drink on the Friday. And that was me out of the police after 28 years.
So looking back then, did you think you were treated fairly and it was a healthy career? Or like some of the ex-cops come on and they've said they were treated unfairly and they've got trauma and PTSD and they didn't get any help, things like that?
I think I was generally treated fairly, in as much as I think I got what I deserved. I worked hard. I was very, very passionate about what I did. I think I had a bit of a disadvantage, didn't have a great education. Increasingly coming from the military was a disadvantage. As the police went on, it became more academic, it became more, they wanted people with university backgrounds. If you look at how the police recruit now, there was very little chance of somebody like me leaving school at 15, no qualifications, being in the army, getting into the police now. They'll only do it for apprenticeship, and I think the police will lose a lot because of that, because you're generally dealing with people that come from my background. That is what you're doing. I wouldn't say I was treated unfairly, but I left with a lot of baggage. I had a very dark 6 months after I retired. My brain just struggled to cope with not having that adrenaline every day.
Did things surface that you'd suppressed? Because you said, you go into a situation and you're shut down from an emotional reaction, aren't you? Because you're looking at what could happen next, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But once all that adrenaline has stopped at the end of your career, did the emotional, things that you'd suppressed, did they come to the surface?
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah, when I first stopped, so I came out in the November, and very, very dark Christmas. Brain was just constantly going, wasn't sleeping. I felt I was either going to choke to death or I had something wrong with my brain.
When you said it was constantly going, was that thoughts? Was that images? Was it both?
Bit of both. It was, somebody described me like the roulette wheel. Someone spun it, and then they take the ball out to say, right, you're finished with the police, but the roulette wheel still goes around, and you're trying to stop it, and it's not. So it was thoughts, images, guilt. Yes, I've done a lot of good things. I'd also done things where I thought I could have done better with that. People that had died, and then the third person I knew committed suicide in the March, 10 days after they retired from the police. It's, the mental health side of stuff after the police. It's getting better, but even now it's at very early stages. Flint House do a good scheme now for retired police officers for mental health. Police care, very good. But there's, a police officer commits suicide every 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That one that you said, your third friend, was that because they were going through that dark period that you were going through, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think he'd suffered from depression before, and I think he'd resigned himself to it when he said he was going to retire. When he did, I saw him maybe a week before I retired. Looking back, he didn't seem his normal. It's easy looking back in hindsight, but he didn't seem his normal self. And I think he'd resigned himself to the fact that that was what he was going to do when he finished. But I said he was a senior officer in the East Midlands, absolutely brilliant man. Could have went on to done a lot of good. I'll never. No, I don't think anyone will know why he did what he did.
What got you through your dark period then?
Mixture of things, mindfulness, which everybody sort of rolls their eyes at, but actually I found it really
That's
good.
Great, mindfulness meditation.
Mindful meditation, medication. I was on medication for a bit because I had to see a doctor, and they'd said, well, we think just to get you through this tough period, go into a bit of medication, which I was against, but I did, and to be fair, it was a good tool in the box for the.
Because a lot of people fall back on alcohol, don't they?
Yeah, I was never a heavy drinker. I just took it. I just started to get me brain in gear. So I was directed to some of the mental health support things that programs that the council had, weirdly, that I thought were very good. Very often I couldn't get out. It was a struggle to get out of bed, so I'd just do a few hours, do some of the processes, and it was a slow process. I took the kids to the Lake District. We went with our family. Glorious winter weather in February. And went to Ullswater and Scarfell Pike is in the distance. They're covered in snow. And I was in a pretty bad way then, suffering from tinnitus, headaches, blurred vision, feeling dizzy. But I thought, I'm going to set myself a challenge. I'm going to walk Scarfell Pike in 6 months. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that, and that'll show that I'm well. So I went back, and the holiday was quite refreshing. Stayed in a lovely place, watched videos with the kids, DVDs with the kids. Took it easy. But still, when I got back, I was back to the home life. It was still tough. But then it just started, as the weather got better, I started to turn corners. I could do more, could get out more, started doing a bit more exercise, and started doing a bit more walking. And then I thought the time has come for me to walk Scarfell Pike. So I took myself off in my camper van, parked up, and went and walked Scarfell Pike. And I put a thing on Facebook, and I haven't really talked a lot about that 6 months. The people I was close to were obviously aware, but I put something on Facebook just for my police colleagues to say that I was pretty down when I came out of the police. But today I've done Scarfell Pike. I promised myself I would do it. And the same strategy applies. Plan your way out, lots of little steps, and ask for help if you need it. That turned a corner. That was 18 months ago. I'm now back working, doing the writing, which is
that cathartic? The writing.
It was with this story, yes, because I think I had that incident from when I was a young police officer in my mind that I wanted to tell, because of the military connections, because of how things were at Knightsbridge, because of the link with me, with the investigation, because it ended up with a good result, and because I had this stuff going through my head around the undercover work, and 1996 was a great year to be in London. It was an exciting time. I just felt that all the elements could be pushed together into an exciting story that would explain the two parts of my sort of working career, really. I was really pleased with it. I got a lot of help from a fantastic writer called Matthew Dunn. He helped me with it. It's all my own work, but he helped me and give me some structure around the writing. And I'm really, really pleased with it.
Congratulations, Robert, on coming through all this and being an author now and coming here and sharing your story. We appreciate that. Is there anything you would like to say to the viewers who've been sitting here watching this now for the last 2+ hours?
No, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you can take something away about the dangers of knife crime, look after your children. Understand that police officers are humans too, and we don't always get it right. If that can be the takeaway from it, then that's great.
Appreciate that. Great way to end it. And here's Robert's book. So link will be in the description box below this video, wherever you are watching this in the world. And can people contact you on socials and follow you?
Yes, so I'm on Facebook, Robert Messenger, and I have a email address, which is robertmessengerauthor@gmx.co.uk.
So let us know what you thought about this in the comments, and please support Robert by clicking on his links. Take care out there wherever you are in the world. And if you are tempted or involved in knife crime, take heed of what Robert said. He's seen what happens, how easy it is, just like that. Goes in, gets an artery, bam, gone. Or if you're the perpetrator, 10, 20, 30 years in prison. It's just not worth the risk. All right, much love and respect. Take care, everyone. Cheers. And huge thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
Yes. That was fantastic.